Pradeep, welcome to Climate Action Live.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to speak to you a little bit about UN Capital Development Fund.
Pradeep, I want to ask you, you are the Executive Secretary at the UN Capital Development Fund. Could you tell us about your mission and your latest work?
Sure. It's really interesting because UN Capital Development Fund was actually created in 1966. And it was created at a time when the Bretton Woods institutions had just come off age and beginning to come of age. IDA, development assistance, finance began to flow to countries. But there was a recognition that even then, back in 1966, that there'll be some countries that would be left behind from financial markets. The UN created a platform to enable exactly those countries to have the kind of assistance that they need to crowd in finance to markets that otherwise would not see that capital ever going there. And that, in a nutshell, is the purpose of UNCDF. It's to support countries around the world, particularly those that are furthest behind, the least developed ones, in confronting their last mile public and private capital needs in order that their most urgent development challenges can be met. And that, to us, of course, is a poverty reduction agenda. It's a climate agenda in today's context. And what we very much treasure at UNCDF is really our ability to move fast, to be agile, and to get to parts of the world that, frankly, is currently getting left behind. So we're out there fighting for, those that are furthest behind, who are being actually left behind. That is the purpose of UNCDF.
Incredible work, Pradeep. Wow, amazing. What a privilege it must be for you to be in a situation where you really are, out there financially supporting those who may well not have had assistance if it wasn't for that fund. Incredible.
Well, Jeremy, I find it to be really a responsibility. I would even go so far as an obligation. And for the simple reason that, look, you and I, we're privileged to be where we are. I come from Sri Lanka. I grew up at a time in Sri Lanka's history that wasn't, something that we're all proud of, but it did happen. Things were tough and rough. And we are somehow in positions now that allow us to give something back. So I feel very privileged to be in an organization like UNCDF to try and do exactly that with the kind of platform that is not just the men and women in UNCDF, but it's really a partnership with member states, with private sector, with international financial institutions to try and all come together and address what really does, at the end of the day, matter to all of us. We all want to see a prosperous, a healthy planet where opportunity to succeed and excel is very much open to everyone who desires to seek it.
So it's June 2024. What's your assessment of the current situation in relation to our journey of protecting our planet and its people?
Well, look, I think, it doesn't take a lot to realize that what we are currently witnessing around the world is extremely worrying. We are, I think, in many ways experiencing and witnessing an actual leaving behind of many people and communities around the world in different forms of issues that we confront today. Take, for example, climate change. Those that are currently the worst affected are those that had the least to do with the creation of the problem, and are currently representing the absolute lowest of greenhouse gas emitters. But we know that they're also the ones who are experiencing the worst impacts of climate change, whether it is in the form of infrastructure damage, whether it's a form of loss of agriculture productivity, whether it is in the form of loss of coral reefs and productive ecosystems that many fisher communities around the world rely on. These are the people that are at the front lines of climate change. And it's not just in the poorest countries of the world, it's also even among the richer countries of the world. If you look at what's happening, even in Europe and the Americas, you find similar patterns. So for us, as at UN and the United Nations, and certainly with UNCDF, it is critically important that attention is paid to try to unlock the kind of finance that is necessary to get on top of this problem. And we're failing in that. The world made a commitment many years ago to ensure that we had $100 billion a year to start addressing many of these problems. Whether or not that is actually materializing, and if it is materializing, going to where that is most needed at the speed that is required in order to address many of these urgent issues, I think there's lots that we can do to improve on. And if we don't get all of these things together, I am afraid that more and more people will be left behind, and that in there's no easy way to say this, is not a good thing for anyone who lives around on Earth. Because what is going to happen, Jeremy, when that goes to an extreme? Well, it's what we have seen throughout history. People move. People do not stay in one place and get whacked on the head, so to speak. They move, they adapt, they find ways in which to survive. And that is going to create, at least in the short run, additional tensions as we are talking about, people crossing borders and so on and so forth. And we've seen plenty of this around the world. So I think, if we are to, get on top of this issue, we first have to recognize that we really are at a very important phase in our, I think, global history. And it is really important that we come together and address these issues head on, because solutions are known. We just need to start implementing them.
A phrase: no climate action, no peace. Could you talk to me about what you think when you hear that statement?
Yeah, I mean, look, to me, it's a real nexus issue, isn't it? The real nexus between climate development and peace building. And I don't think it's rocket science, to be perfectly honest. If climate change reduces the amount of arable land and water flows and agriculture yields, what we are talking about is increasing, amounts of scarcity, more scarcity than we currently face, and that is, of course, the essential ingredient for conflict, and we've seen that through history. So and that is a reality that we are currently facing today as well. I mean, we are talking about a period in which, I think the number of conflicts that we're seeing, about 80 a year, or higher, one of the highest numbers in the last 80 years, so to speak. So I think, we have to pay attention to the realities around the world when it comes to the real causation behind many of the conflicts that we see today. So when I hear, no climate action, no peace, I am reminded of what our Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed said, who said recently, I think something to the effect that if we fail to meet the development needs of our time, we will fail to meet and secure the peace necessary for our future. So for me, I think when it comes to finance, the truth is also that when you're investing in climate finance, for example, or finance that has climate positive outcomes, you are effectively investing in global security. And this, to me, is a non-negotiable issue. We all want that security, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what your political persuasion may be, you want security. So I think this is where we also have to be optimistic, because if, water, if land, if nature assets, if all of these can be drivers of conflict, then they can also be, Jeremy, drivers of peace. But it'll require the kind of innovation that I think is going to be really important, that we aim for the utmost possible in order to turn these drivers of conflict into drivers of peace, including on innovative finance.
Finally, if people would like to support the UN Capital Development Fund and its efforts to create a more peaceful and sustainable world, how can they do that?
Well, look, I think first and foremost, use your voice. I think when people demand of their lawmakers and governments that leaving behind anyone is not only unacceptable, but ensuring that no one is left behind is simply the right thing to do, that is a voice that must be heard. But it's also one of the best ways to support peace building and stability. Speak up for those that have the least voice in many of these conversations. And if people demand that sustainable development, including confronting climate change, is a priority, needs to become a priority, it will become a priority. When it comes to UN member states, and this is all countries around the world, they are in a position to support UNCDF right now, as they are in a position to support the entire UN system. Remember, the UN is ultimately a reflection of all of us who have a very, core desire to come together as nations and work together to solve many of these problems. It is, that is what the UN ultimately represents. So when it comes to climate action, I would say the following is important for us as UNCDF. We can and we must support countries to implement critical actions on adaptation and mitigation in a variety of ways. And the way that we would do it in UNCDF is to deploy financial instruments in markets that others think are too risky. They would never look at them. We are there as a UN platform to go exactly into those types of markets. So the more challenging it is, the more excited we get because we feel we can have impact. Secondly, I think we want to design and roll out our performance-based models to crowd in finance for locally led adaptation. This is important because at the end of the day, we're not talking about, just dishing out grant money left, right, and center and forgetting about the impacts and results that we want to see. No, not at all. We want to make sure that scarce public funds are used in ways that incentivize, change and action that's measurable, that's verifiable, and most importantly, that also crowds in significant amounts of private capital that's out there that must go to work. Thirdly, we want to work with national development banks, and we're currently doing that, making use of our guarantee facilities to create confidence in the market that then unlocks private capital for clean energy, for plastic solutions, for agriculture solutions, all of which ultimately have a very community, people-centered approach. We want to make sure that we are able to deploy innovative insurance products, as we are currently doing in the Pacific. Recently an evaluation found that we've reached 1 million people in the Pacific through some of our insurance-related work. I mean, this has such a big impact on communities that are in rural settings. So I think through a variety of these sorts of, we refer to them as blended finance solutions, because they bring multiple actors and multiple forms of financing and capital into, providing the kind of resource envelope that's needed for the kind of scaled up impact that we'd like to see. I think that's where we can add value as an organization. So, we're very proud to be part of the UN system, to work alongside our sister agencies in the United Nations Development Program and many others to support what collective to us is a climate promise, to make sure that we contribute to the efforts of countries in addressing climate change. And we will keep fighting the good fight until somebody tells us it cannot be done, and we will fight harder even then.
Pradeep, we wish you the very best on your journey and the incredible work of the UN Capital Development Fund. The very best of luck.
Thank you very much.